I quit my job as a sea worker the day I discovered I had slept with my father.
Second part.
Part of me wanted to kick him out, cut all ties once and for all. But another part, the part of the child I once was, wanted to believe in him, wanted to believe that he could somehow fix the mess. You can't just show up here and expect everything to be resolved with words, I said, trying to maintain control. I spent years angry at you, and now suddenly you want to be the father you never were? He nodded, his eyes filled with pain. I'm not going to ask you to forgive me. I just want to prove to you that I can do something right this time. The silence between us was so thick it felt like an insurmountable barrier. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but something inside me told me that maybe I should let him try. At least once. This is going to take time, I said finally, my voice softer than I expected. The time it takes. He smiled, a timid smile, almost hopeful. I didn't respond. I didn't know if I was ready for that. But for now, that conversation needed to end there. After he left, I closed the door and collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. My head was a jumble of feelings and memories, and all I wanted was to sleep and forget the chaos for a few hours. But sleep didn't come easily. A few days passed, and Clara was still in the shelter. I visited her regularly, and it was a relief to see her calmer, away from the hell that Raul represented. However, we couldn't forget that Raul was still out there. We knew he wouldn't give up, that the battle wasn't over. During one of those visits, Clara seemed more worried than usual. She pulled me aside, and in a low voice, said to me, I heard from a friend that Raul is asking about you. He's not going to let this go. My heart raced. I knew this would happen, but hearing it was like taking a punch to the stomach. What do we do? I asked, feeling panic take over me. I don't know, but I think it's time to go to the police again. He's becoming more dangerous, and I don't want anything to happen to you because of me. Clara's eyes were misty, fear evident. I nodded. I knew she was right. We needed protection, anything that could keep us safe. And this time, I wouldn't let fear paralyze me. We went to the police station together once again. Clara was nervous, her hands restless in her lap, while I tried to maintain a facade of calm. The officer who attended us was the same as last time, and when we explained that Raul was threatening us again, he made quick notes, not taking his eyes off the paper. You already have a restraining order against him, right? The officer asked, seeming not very impressed by the gravity of the situation. Yes, but he won't stop. He called me, said he knew where we were. He wasn't afraid of these measures. My voice was firmer than I felt inside. Raul always seemed to be one step ahead, and I knew that the mere presence of the police wouldn't stop him. The officer sighed and finally lifted his eyes. We'll investigate this. But, to be honest, you know how these things are. He can only be arrested if he violates the protective order. If he gets close, call immediately. That wasn't enough. I knew it wasn't. Raul was hunting us, like a predator who knows exactly how to manipulate fear. We left the police station with the feeling that we were alone, even with all the bureaucracy in our favor. Clara was visibly shaken, and as we walked back to the shelter, her voice trembled with anger and despair. I can't take living like this anymore. Always afraid he's going to show up, always waiting for the next blow. She stopped walking and looked at me with a mix of frustration and helplessness. Will this ever end? Will we ever have peace? I wanted to reassure her, tell her everything would be okay, but the truth was, I didn't have those answers either. Raul was the kind of man who didn't give up, and now that he had lost control over Clara, he was determined to regain that power by any means necessary. We'll make it, I said, forcing a smile that even I didn't believe. We just need to keep fighting, one step at a time. In the following days, Clara became more reclusive in the shelter. She had started therapy, trying to deal with the traumas Raul had caused, but his shadow still loomed over us. I visited her whenever I could, bringing little news from the outside world, trying to distract her from reality. But I was also worried. I knew Raul was still nearby, and every unexpected call made me freeze in fear. While trying to keep Clara safe, my own life began to go off the rails. Bills were piling up, and my job, which was already emotionally draining, felt even more unbearable after my encounter with my father. I couldn't walk into a hotel room without the memory of that day invading my thoughts. Everything brought me back to that moment. I needed an escape, but it felt like the weight of everything. Raul, my father, my life, was dragging me down, slowly drowning me. Then, on a quiet night, when I was at home trying to sleep, I heard knocks on the door. My heart leaped in my chest. Who could it be at this hour? I got up slowly, my body tense, and went to the door. I looked through the peephole and saw the last person I expected. It was Raul. My body froze and my mind raced, trying to process what was happening. He stood there outside my door, his face filled with controlled fury, like a predator lying in wait. I knew I couldn't open it. I knew he was there to intimidate me, to scare me, or worse. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police number, my hands shaking so much that I nearly dropped the device. Raul is here, I whispered into the phone, my voice low, as if he could hear me from the other side of the door. The operator assured me that a patrol car was on the way, but the minutes felt like hours. I could hear Raul banging on the door, harder each time, and his voice echoed through the hallways of the building. "Open this door. Do you think you can hide from me?" He laughed, a cruel laugh that sent panic racing through my veins. I stood there, pressed against the wall, praying for the police to arrive before he did something worse. The fear was overwhelming, but I knew I couldn't show weakness. Finally, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance, and the banging stopped. Raul must have realized the police were coming because the silence that followed was heavy. I waited a few more seconds until I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. When the police arrived, I explained everything that had happened, every word Raul had said. They promised to conduct regular patrols in the area, but we knew that wasn't enough. Raul had violated the protective order. Yes, but he wasn't stupid. He knew how to disappear before getting caught. And that only made everything more dangerous. The next day, I went to the shelter to tell Clara what had happened. Her eyes widened in terror when she heard that Raul had found me, and her first reaction was to want to run away. "He's going to kill us, isn't he?" she asked, her voice choked with panic. I knelt in front of her, holding her trembling hands. "No, I'm not going to let that happen. We've already talked to the police. They are aware, and he will be arrested. We won't let him win." Clara started to cry, tears streaming down her face marked by the scars of abuse. I hugged her tightly, trying to convey any strength that still remained in me, even though inside I was also falling apart. The truth was we had no more options. We needed to find a way to put an end to this stalking once and for all. The day dawned gray, as if the weather reflected the storm that was about to hit us. I still felt the effects of the previous night when Raul had been at my door. The constant fear was suffocating, and I knew that Clara was sinking deeper and deeper into the terror of being found. I saw no way out. The police seemed powerless against Raul's threats. That same day, while I tried to process the events and come up with a new plan, I heard another knock on my apartment door. This time, my body didn't freeze. I was too exhausted to deal with any surprises. However, when I opened the door, who was there surprised me even more. It was my father. He looked at me seriously, and for a second, I thought it might have been a mistake to let him back into my life. But something in his gaze was different. There was a determination I had never seen before. Something that made him dangerous. "Can I come in?" he asked, not waiting for a response. I closed the door behind me, unsure of what to expect from this unexpected visit. The atmosphere was heavy, and I didn't know what the next bombshell would be in my life. "I know you don't want any more trouble, but I heard that this guy Raul is threatening you. He's after Clara too, isn't he?" His voice was firm, almost threatening, but there was something more. An urgency. I sat down on the couch, running my fingers through my hair. "How do you know this?" He looked at the floor for a moment, as if weighing what to say. "I have my contacts. Maybe. I haven't just stayed away from you all these years. I've done a lot of wrong things, hung out with dangerous people. But now, I can use that to my advantage. And yours. Do you think you can fix this?" I asked, skeptical. The idea of my father, who had always been a runaway, now presenting himself as a solution to such a big problem as Raul, seemed ridiculous. He looked at me, his eyes steady. Raul isn't the first guy I've seen trying to control people through fear. And he won't be the last. But now this guy has crossed the line, and I won't let him hurt you or Clara. Not this time. For a moment, I was silent, trying to process what he was telling me. He seemed determined, as if this was his only chance to correct what he had done to me all those years ago. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, suspicious. He leaned closer and spoke quietly, as if someone might be listening. "I can make Raoul disappear. You don't need to worry about the details. I just need you to trust me this time." My heart raced. Those words sounded like a dangerous sentence. I knew what he was insinuating, and a part of me was terrified at the idea of going down that path. But another part, the one that was tired of living in fear, was tempted. "You want to get rid of him?" I whispered, incredulous. "I want to protect you." He looked into my eyes without looking away. "This won't be pretty, but sometimes what needs to be done isn't." I knew I was at a crossroads. If I said yes, I would be accepting the darkness my father carried. If I said no, I would remain at the mercy of Raoul, waiting for him to strike at any moment. I closed my eyes, trying to organize my thoughts. Raoul was a monster, and the police seemed unable to stop him. My father, on the other hand, was offering me a definitive solution, something that scared me as much as it relieved me. "What if it goes wrong?" I asked, trying to steady my trembling voice. "It won't." He smiled, a hard smile, with no trace of uncertainty. "I'll take care of it. I don't need you to get involved. I just need you to trust me." Clara entered the room at that moment, her expression weary, and her eyes filled with doubt upon seeing my father there. She approached slowly, and I knew she had been eavesdropping on our conversation from the hallway. I didn't need to explain anything. She already understood what was at stake. "Do you really think you can stop him?" Clara asked, looking at my father with a mix of fear and hope. He nodded. "I won't let him hurt anyone else. I'll take care of this before he has a chance to do anything." Clara looked at me, waiting for me to make the decision. The weight of everything was on my shoulders, and I knew that any choice would have consequences. But there was no more room for hesitation. "Do whatever it takes," I said finally, my voice low but firm. My father didn't respond, just nodded and got up. "Stay here. I'll take care of this. And remember, don't get involved. When it's all over, you'll know." He left through the door, leaving a heavy silence in the air. Clara and I exchanged glances, unsure of what to expect. The tension was palpable, and the uncertainty of what would come next was unbearable. I knew that this decision would change everything. There was no turning back. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. Clara and I tried to maintain our routine, but the constant fear and the anticipation of what was to come suffocated us. The idea that my father was involved in something dangerous to protect us haunted me. I knew he had a dark past, but I didn't expect him to be willing to cross that line for me. One afternoon, my phone rang. It was my father. His tone was different, firm, but this time, more controlled. "Everything is ready. I need you both to be prepared. The police are going to be involved too," he said, getting straight to the point. I felt a mix of relief and tension. He had involved the police, which made me believe he wasn't just planning something illegal, but rather a trap for Raoul. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice trembling. I spoke with some of my contacts, people I still knew from the time I got involved in the wrong things. Raoul thinks he's going to meet an old ally tonight, but in reality, that meeting will be his downfall. The police will be there, ready to catch him in the act, with enough evidence to put him away for a long time. He paused, his breath heavy on the other end of the line. "I want you and Clara to be safe. I will be there myself, with the officers, to ensure he has no way to escape this time." I felt the weight of his words. Raoul would finally face the consequences of his actions, but the fact that my father was personally involved heightened the tension. I knew he was putting his own life at risk to protect us. That night, Clara and I stayed together in the shelter, waiting for news. The hours seemed to drag on, and every sound put us on high alert. Finally, the phone rang again. I picked up quickly, my heart racing. We got him. Raoul was caught in the act with evidence that involves not only the threats against you, but also other crimes. "The police are taking care of everything now. He won't bother you anymore," my father said, his voice now softer, with a calmness I had never heard before. I closed my eyes, feeling the tears of relief flow. Clara was by my side, her eyes also watery, but there was a glimmer of hope there, something I hadn't seen in a long time. "Thank you," I whispered. not knowing how to express the gratitude and relief I felt. My father had done the unthinkable. He had protected us when no one else could. "I only did what I should have done from the beginning," he replied with a tone of redemption. "Now you are safe." Raul was out of our lives. And for the first time in a long time, Clara and I could breathe. The days that followed Raul's arrest were a deep breath of relief, as if a dark cloud had finally dissipated. Clara and I were trying to adjust our lives to this new reality, a world where we no longer needed to live in constant fear. But the weight of everything that had happened still hung over us. I knew there was one more person I needed to confront, my father. After what he did for us, I felt divided. He had done what he promised, saved us. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the years of abandonment, the pain he had caused in my life and in my heart. However, something inside me was beginning to change. Perhaps it was gratitude for what he had done, or maybe the understanding that, despite all his flaws, he was trying to fix what remained of our relationship. One afternoon, he showed up at the shelter. This time, his demeanor was lighter, although he still carried the weary air of someone who had lived a life full of mistakes and regrets. Clara was with me, and when she saw him, she didn't back away. I knew she also respected him now in a different way. He was no longer the ghost of my past, but rather a man trying to redeem himself. "We need to talk," I said, finally gathering the courage to face everything that still lay between us. He nodded and sat down at the small table in the shelter's dining area. Clara stayed by my side, as always, supporting each other. "I know you've done a lot for me and Clara, and I won't forget that. But I also know that I can't just ignore everything that happened before. The years you were absent," my voice faltered, but I continued. "It marked me deeply. I had to survive on my own, and for a long time, I harbored a huge hatred for you." He looked at me, his eyes filled with deep sadness. "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me easily. I know I left scars on you, and nothing I do can erase that. But I'm trying. I won't run away anymore. I won't be the coward I was in the past." There was a silence between us, and I realized that, for the first time, he wasn't trying to justify himself. He was simply admitting his mistakes. There were no excuses, just the truth. And strangely, that touched me in an unexpected way. "I don't know how to do this," I confessed, my voice choked. "I don't know how to let you back into my life. But maybe I can try." He smiled, a weary smile but filled with hope. "That's all I can ask for." Clara, who had been quiet until then, finally spoke. "You did for us what no one else did. You protected us, and that means a lot." He looked at Clara with gratitude, as if he understood that, even though he wasn't her father, he had earned her respect and trust. "I promise both of you, from now on, I will be here, as I should have been from the beginning." He took a deep breath, looking at us firmly. "You can count on me. Always." I knew the journey wouldn't be easy, that there would be days when the hurt of the past would still resurface, but at that moment, something inside me opened up. Maybe it wasn't about forgetting, but about making space for something new. "Let's try," I said, looking at him and Clara. Together, the following months were like a slow reconstruction of everything that had been destroyed. Clara and I began to rebuild ourselves, supporting each other every step of the way. Raul was out of our lives, imprisoned with all the evidence that my father and the police had gathered, and we knew he wouldn't hurt us anymore. My father, for his part, kept his promise. He was there, present in a way I never imagined possible. Every day, he made an effort to be the person I needed, not the perfect father, but a present one. He reached out to Clara too, caring for her as if she were his own daughter. And gradually, I began to realize that forgiveness was not a weakness, but rather a liberation. I started studying again. Clara, with the help of the NGO, secured a new job, far from all the chaos Raul had brought into her life. We were finally building something that didn't rely on fear, but on the strength we found in each other. My father was always nearby, helping us with whatever we needed, and for the first time I saw him as something more than the man who had abandoned me. He became a part of my life, not as a distant figure, but as someone who, despite all the mistakes, was willing to fight for us. And little by little, I started accepting that. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt lighter. The pain was still there, in scars that would never completely fade, but now there was more room for hope, for new beginnings. I didn't know what the future held for us, but I knew that, for the first time, we were no longer alone. Clara and I were at peace, and surprisingly, I was also at peace with my father. Not because he had erased the past, but because he had finally chosen to be present in the future. And that, for me, was enough. Watch the video that's appearing on your screen, and remember to subscribe to the channel to keep receiving more stories. We'll see you in a few seconds.